Hello and welcome to SpyHards podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, lighting the fuse one more time.
It's burning in my face. And this podcast may self-destruct in 90 minutes or so. But before it does, we need to talk about what we're celebrating this week. You know, your mission, folks at home, should you choose to accept it, is to revisit the exploding aquarium restaurant with us, to dangle from the ceiling in Langley, to get some gum on your windscreen, and talk about a very confused looking John Voight, which is something that hasn't changed in nigh on 30 years. And that is, you know, we're celebrating 30 years of Mission Impossible this week. What a film. But we can't celebrate it alone, you see. We're assembling an IMF team worthy of Langley itself, quite frankly. Joining us, firstly, he's a film critic, a spy movie enthusiast, and quite possibly the internet's last surviving defender of Spectre.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'll go to bat for it. Sure. Why
not? Yeah. He is the host and creator of the Film Speak YouTube channel. It is the one and only Mr. Griffin Schiller. Hello, Griffin. Welcome back.
Hey, gents. Great to be back. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be talking about like a film, not to give too much away, but a film that like I actually really like, because the past few times I think I've been on, we've talked about absolute garbage. Spectre, notwithstanding, but this one, but even Spectre has its issues. So it's just nice. It's nice to be on talking about something that I love. And I broke out the goods for you today. Tom Cruise as Austin Powers, the T-shirt.
That's right.
Such a deep cut.
Are you saying that Ava, your last film, wasn't like a home run?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I forgot the name of Ava as soon as we finished that conversation. I just dumped it from my memory. I was like, you know what? See you later.
Well, we need to complete this IMF. This lovely leather-bound book in front of me has one more face in it. Joining us is a writer, a producer whose espionage dossier includes the likes of Alias, Agent X, Citadel, and of course shows like The Saint, Heroes, and Star Trek Discovery, meaning he might be the closest thing to an actual IMF agent we've ever had on the show. I think so. It's the one and only Jesse Alexander. Jesse, welcome aboard.
Hi, thank you very much for having me be part of this, and hopefully I can deliver some insight and content that makes it worthy of the bandwidth that I'm taking up here. But it's exciting to be able to talk about what we're going to talk about, Tom Cruise and the Mission movies.
Well, you're quite a unique entity, I think, just in general. We love you. But also in the sense of like your contributions to spy television. I mentioned it in the intro there. You've got a lot of fingers in a lot of spy pies or spies. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all that stuff has always been something that I've been interested in. And, going into the Wayback Machine, I was a huge fan of a show called Wild Wild West. That was really my version of James Bond, which was an amazing TV show in the US with Robert Conrad, where he essentially played like James Bond in the Old West and had all kinds of gadgets and gimmicks and was doing sort of crazy espionage stuff. So I've always been into that stuff. Always read spy fiction, watched spy movies. And in college, I actually studied espionage and military aviation and political history, stuff. So I had quite a deep knowledge about the real world stuff, about spies and how all that stuff worked, and the Walker spy case and the Philby and all those kinds of things. And it really served me well when I got into TV working on Alias with JJ. I had a deep knowledge of that stuff, and I will say I wrote a significant portion of all the set pieces that are in Alias, which was, I think, maybe almost 100 episodes. I can't quite remember. But myself and Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orsi and Rick Orsi, Bob's brother, were really the heart and soul of the spy elements on that show.
We actually just watched the first episode of Alias on the Patreon. I'd never watched it in my life, strangely enough, and I'm now hooked on the show. So no spoilers, please, for Alias. I don't know what happens yet. I will be making my way through the show.
It's pretty insane, and definitely if you do stick with it, um, I actually worked on the pilot with JJ on all those set pieces and all those actions, like how did they she get out of a chair and like all that kind of stuff that's in that, and, all those gags and everything. So, um, yeah, I think it we did a pretty good job on that show of really keeping it emotionally grounded with Sydney and also trying never to get too stuck in um, getting too far ahead of our skis and always entertaining ourselves and trying to make things cool. And JJ's approach to pushing not necessarily just the budget, but the filmmaking techniques that allowed us to shoot the Disney backlot or Disney lot for going around the world, filming a lot of our action set pieces in the underground tunnels under the Disney studio and reforming the parking garage into shooting ranges and corners of the smoking lounge into a Prague park. And so we really tried to put a lot on screen with very little money.
Well, speaking of putting a lot on screen, Cam, I did already say it, we've all sort of mentioned it, but what are we? Tell us really what we're doing this week. Break it down for us.
We are celebrating the 30th anniversary of Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise's debut as a producer overseeing a major motion picture that is going to lead to many more major motion pictures for him.
And I kind of want to do a little icebreaker, throw it around the room. When I say the word Mission Impossible, what is the first image that comes to everyone's mind? And we're going to get used to this format, listeners at home, people watching online. We're going to go around the room. So for me, I'm going to start us with Griffin. When I say Mission Impossible, what comes to mind?
I mean, it's got to be the him dangling from the ceiling in the CIA building in Langley. I mean, that's the iconic shot. I think that cemented the identity of what Mission Impossible was, because, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later on, but like up until that point in the film, it was just like a lot of like smoke and mirrors, a lot of just like spycraft stuff. But like that was the stunt, and then
it was so impactful. It just is so attached to him, spy set pieces, and that movie.
Cam?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the most enduring image is him dangling in the vault, almost landing on the floor. That's like the big moment and the one they call back to over the future of the series. But I feel like there was a point before that image became so unbelievably locked in amber where maybe like I remember one of the shots that was really heavily marketed was the moment where he pulls off the mask. And I feel like in some ways, especially earlier on, what stood out to me about Mission Impossible was a couple things. It was the masks being pulled off and like the reveal of that, and also just the shot of the fuse being lit. I feel like
Oh, for
that
sure.
became like that fuse
yeah.
being lit and the way they've played with that over the course of the series. Those are kind of like the low key ones, but I do think they were very important to giving that franchise an identity outside of just more spy stuff.
And also sort of a visual language that it then developed over the years and the iterations. I mean, James Bond has 60 years worth of films to look back on now, and you know what the gun barrel means. You know what the dots in Doctor No mean, even though they come back in subsequent films. Like it's weird how those little like on-screen dots play such a big part in Bond. I mean, Griffin, you've got Bond artwork around you. I bet you could probably find the dots somewhere in that artwork.
I will just jump in to say I didn't know we could talk about the whole franchise when we say Mission Impossible, because for me it would be the fuse. I thought it was like only on that's such a good point. But for me it's the fuse if we were going for the whole franchise.
Yeah.
Well, I think then I would actually personally I would go with the Langley heist. So it's interesting that there's sort of a 2 for 2 here, but all of this goes back to 1996 with Brian De Palma. And I want to go back first to sort of those that perhaps remember the time a little bit more. And I'll show my age, as I really wasn't all that aware of the film coming out, and I didn't see it until around about 98, 99 in preparation for Mission Impossible 2, because I really wanted to see that film. So I'll recuse myself from this part of the conversation. I know Mission Impossible 2 is not everyone's favorite, but as a metal fan in that age, it was very much up my alley. The film itself wasn't, but the smoke and mirrors around the film I was very much into.
Scott was taking a look around.
Certainly was. I mean, Cam, I'll throw it to you your way. Were you sort of aware of the build-up for Mission Impossible?
So yes, but the brand Mission Impossible meant nothing to me at that point in my life. I was a teenager. I would have been 15. And that is really the tipping point for me becoming a huge movie fan. Mm-hmm. And the summer of 66 or of 1996, I should say, is always going to really jump out to me because it felt like such a huge summer. You had Independence Day, you had Twister. I was a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. His follow-up to True Lies was coming out that summer, Eraser. Not a movie necessarily that people hold in high regard, but it meant something at that point. Another movie, very, very noisy, that people probably don't think of now, was Striptease. The promotional blitz for Demi Moore's Striptease was a huge thing. And so it's like, and you had Nutty Professor as well with Eddie Murphy. It was just like this endless string of Cable Guy, Jim Carrey, his like follow-up to his big streak. Like that summer was massive. So Mission Impossible really became another one of the movies. And I remember seeing the commercials and seeing the shot particularly of the helicopter rotor about to pierce Tom Cruise's throat and kind of going, oh, it's another TV adaptation. Okay. And just not really caring because there was a lot of those at that point. Saw it at home on video when it came out and enjoyed it, but was completely baffled by the story, the plot of the film, which sounds, I think, ludicrous now. But at the time, it was a very common feeling, which was, I like the set pieces, but I don't understand this movie.
I think that might be something we come back to in terms of the plot. We'll dive into a bit. But Jesse, I want to come to you. What are your memories casting your mind back to 96, the build up to Mission Impossible? Were you a fan of the TV show?
Yeah, look, I'm probably the oldest person here. I'll be 59 in June. So I actually grew up with the show in reruns on TV. So I was very familiar with the brand and the franchise, and was looking forward to the movie. Had been somewhat of a De Palma fan. I must admit that Independence Day was more my jam that summer. I was,
Mine too.
a big Roland and Dean fan of those
Yeah.
lunatics. And yeah, I was psyched for it and looking forward to it. But just because I don't know how many people are listening to this podcast, I thought it was slow at the time. I thought the movie was slow. So it wasn't necessarily a full win for me when I saw it that first time. But it certainly had a massive impact.
And then Griffin, what about yourself? Any memories of it coming out, or sort of maybe your initial response to the film?
Yeah. I definitely didn't see it when it first came out because I was born in '95, so I'm 30. So I was barely one.
The door's there if you want to leave now. It's fine.
Barely born.
But I do remember. I actually can't remember if this was my first one or if MI3 was my first one, because I remember a lot of the fanfare surrounding MI3, specifically after MI2, and kind of going back to the roots, I guess, if you will, of what Mission Impossible was. I think I was like in 5th grade or whatever, or maybe even 6th grade, and I had classmates that saw it and were like excited about it. So I do remember seeing MI3 and falling in love with that film. But I can't remember if that was what ignited me to go back and want to rewatch the first film, or if I saw the first film going into the third one. Either way, because I was so young, I was watching it and I just didn't get it. I thought it was like really, really hard to follow. I wasn't, again, because I was so young, I wasn't really familiar with De Palma at the time and everything that he would become, that he is known for in filmmaking. But it was a film that, like, over the years since that initial viewing, I just continually revisited because of how drawn I was to just kind of getting it, to figuring out all the pieces, to picking up little details that perhaps you didn't notice on that first viewing. And I do think, now 30 years on, that is that's where it shines. Like it is a movie that is almost designed to reward repeat viewings because of how it almost invites you to participate in the spycraft itself. Kind of piggybacking off of De Palma's just knack for voyeurism and whatnot. So, yeah, it's a movie that that I've had a very long relationship with. It's one that I'm always very excited to go back and revisit. But yeah, that initial viewing, I think for many of us, I'm sure, like I remember even my parents they were like, "Well, this is just like they liked it, but they were just like, it's kind of like hard to wrap your head around, I think, on that initial viewing." And based on the reception at the time, it seems like that was the common consensus as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's also just quite interesting. I didn't really plan this in terms of ages of this discussion, but there seems to be sort of a decade between all of us, really, in a sense.
Yeah.
So I was when this came out, I was 10. And by the time I watched it, I was probably about 12. And I think my reaction to it, preparing for Mission Impossible 2, was this is quite slow. This isn't James Bond. This isn't GoldenEye. And that was my sort of benchmark for a spy movie in 98, 97 was Tomorrow Never Dies and GoldenEye. And they're far faster films.
Yeah.
That's a great point, actually, because yes, you had GoldenEye the year before. And so Bond had been relaunched, and as a Bond fan, there was a certain energy level you expected from something that looked like Bond. And Mission Impossible, for, now we have so many different spy franchises that we could focus on, Bourne, and obviously Bond, and then there's all these attempts to start new stuff like Kingsman. But at the time, it was like, well, if it's a big blockbuster spy film, it better be like Bond.
And you're also getting the mission, not the Mission films. You're also getting the Austin Powers quite soon as well. By the time I saw it, like that, the lampooning had begun already. And
that 90s like aughts era, it was kind of a bit of another like spy craze, like similar, different from the 60s, but just like a post Cold War spy craze. And I think you see that reflected in a lot of those films. And then Bourne, obviously more of a post 9/11 sort of thing. But yeah, I think what I like with Mission, like you talk about like having Bond and GoldenEye specifically as like the comparison point, right? You're just sort of like, well, this is everything that movie is not, and that kind of took you by surprise. I think in hindsight, that's what I love about this movie, is that it is denying you everything that you expect out of a Bond film. It is in so many ways the anti-Bond film. And when you compare that to what, McQuarrie and what Cruise have kind of crafted in the latter entries, which is very, very, very clearly riffing on a specific era of Bond, it was nice that there was this more like grounded, sleazy interpretation of espionage that I feel like hewed closer to what a life in that line of work actually resembled versus the more glamorous globe-trotting nature of a James Bond.
I don't imagine they're all hanging off of ceilings, the real-life spies out there. But
well, that's true, yeah.
I doubt they're watching, to be fair, so they can't really correct us. Well, it sounds like we've all kind of...
Go ahead, jump in on one thing? Like I do, I am thinking about it because I do think that Mission 1... I think it's interesting that you brought up GoldenEye, because I hadn't realized it had come out the year before, which I really like GoldenEye. And for me, that was a great sort of James Bond movie. And I think it's important to think about Mission 1 in the context, or with the people who made it, with, De Palma, Town on the script. Kep was pretty young still, I think, in his career when he wrote that. But I think Town was involved in the writing of The Parallax View, and De Palma wrote or directed Blowout, and was, as you mentioned, very voyeuristic, and coming out of that age of the, moving into the 70s filmmakers that were still dealing with the betrayal of Watergate and the church committee, and the concept of individuals and conspiracies and lone gunmen, and I think it's really important just to remember that it was really driving the art of those filmmakers when they were telling that story and conveying that tone in that movie. That De Palma's approach to a spy movie supported by Town is very different than and I can't even remember which guy who directed GoldenEye and what that
Martin
would be.
Campbell.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
it really is an interesting, it's kind of a throwback, honestly.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
Mission One is a throwback to some of those movies that came out in the 70s that were, Parallax View, Conversation. God, there's another one that is amazing with Jeff Bridges that I just watched that is a great conspiracy movie. But it sort of bridges that gap between old generation spy, conspiracy, new generation stunt show.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think is really important because Mission One really is a cinematic masterpiece. The craftsmanship in De Palma's direction, choices of shots, and Paul Hirsch editing it is incredible.
Well, and you mentioned, David Kep, who come off of Jurassic Park, and you
Yeah.
definitely see this is a walk towards where blockbusters are going, where CG is becoming more and more important to the process, and you see that in Mission. But this is also the summer, as we mentioned, Independence Day and Twister. Twister in particular was a big, effect showcase at the time.
It is interesting just looking at sort of the legacy of Mission, and that's, I guess, what we're going to be talking about for the next 60 minutes or so. But I think all of us could all agree that whilst we may have had a bumpy start with this film, we've all come to appreciate it in our own unique ways, which we'll talk about.
Yeah,
I had this written down in my notes as a grower, not a shower, which is probably not what De Palma would have liked to have been called, but hey ho, I'll take it anyway. One thing that this film always gets rebutted with on online conversations, and I put it down in our notes because I wanted to talk about it, is the story, perhaps the pacing, but most importantly, the twist. Now, for those who have not been paying too much attention, the villain of this film, spoilers, is Jim Phelps. And Jim Phelps was the leader of the IMF back in the television show. And for many people who are fans of the television show first and foremostly, it felt like a bit of a betrayal to them. Personally, I had no stakes in it. As I mentioned, I was coming in fresh. It means nothing to me. But the way I always justify it is as if they wrote a new Bond film, put M in it, and then made M the villain. And
Which they wanted to do at a certain point. Yeah.
Which they did want to do. But they didn't because of blowback and other reasons. So I want to throw it out to the room about your thoughts on the Jim Phelps twist and if that sort of stood out to you. And I'll throw it to Jesse first because you said you were a fan of the show. So what did that mean to you?
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is very overblown. And, certainly on the internet that's looking for conflict and surus and nonsense, because the show is dead. Like, I don't even, it was just, that's an irrelevant argument. Like, that was a dead brand. That was not, no one was like, Jim Phelps, how could they do this to Jim Phelps? Like, no one gives a shit about that. No, and still, anyone who gives a shit about that is probably full of shit. Like, it's more, again, it goes back to sort of what I was talking about. It's a detective trope, right? The guy that hires you, the guy that you trust, your police captain is the guy that betrays you. It's the hero's journey. It's the the young naive person who believes this thing, seeing it's Chinatown, Jake, right? That the system is against you. And I think that is, very much what they were doing then, that you can't trust the system and you can't trust this world that you're a part of, and loyalties and things. So I do not ascribe to that, Jim Phelps rage being real. And was certainly would have been, one of my go-tos if you're as a writer, if you were looking to hand off the franchise to somebody new and to reinvent it and to use something that was embedded in the IP, but build it anew. So I thought that was great and well done by them.
Again, this is one of those things that you either have to feel or don't. Do Cam or Griffin have anything to say about the Jim Phelps twist? Does it particularly irk you or all for it? What are your thoughts?
No. I similar to Jesse. I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think it is, yeah, similar to what you were saying about, it being just like the classic, like detective trope, the Chinatown sort of disillusionment thing. I just think it's like a really interesting direction to take a character who has spent his entire life in service of his government, and for the Cold War to kind of end the way it did, and him kind of trying to figure out what to do next with the life that he has, and maybe feeling a bit burnt by his government. Like, yeah, it makes sense that this guy would probably crack and try and figure out how to continue his own missions, continue being a spy on his own terms. It just, you know, just this uncertainty of identity, and this perhaps just like being frustrated that he's not getting the chance to at like the American dream that perhaps he was promised, that the next generation is. Like, I don't know, it's just a really compelling thing to do with that character, this guy pining for the glory days, and then casting an actor like Jon Voight in that role, knowing kind of what we know about him now, I think makes that casting actually extra interesting. It just adds another layer of just like, oh, like on top of, Jon Voight being a tremendous actor, I do think his off-screen persona of being this guy pining for the glory days, right? Of trying to go back to a certain period of time where he, feels like he recognizes his surroundings a bit more. You see that in this character. So it's very pressy and all that. It kind of spoke to how I think De Palma is able to read people, similar to like the Tom Cruise casting. I know Tom Cruise was a producer on the film and was involved way before De Palma got involved, but there is something about the way that De Palma uses Cruise throughout the film, and the persona he presents versus perhaps what is underneath that persona. I think I don't know, it makes for some interesting dynamics in those two together in scenes. I think my only issue with the whole Phelps thing is that I don't think it's not really a pull the rug out from under you sort of thing that I think the movie thinks it's going for. It is a bit, you could see it coming a bit, and then I also think it happens a bit too early, because there's a whole chunk of the rest of the film yet, and it kind of, I don't want to say it sucks all the oxygen out of the room, but it does, I don't know, it lessens the tension a little bit. But what I do like that you get out of it is seeing how Ethan is the way De Palma and his editor were cutting through, we're cutting the film. I like how you see Ethan's processing of the reveal, and like what he's thinking versus what he's saying in a given scene, and I think that's really rewarding upon repeat viewings, and it kind of it allows me to stomach a what I think to be a pretty early reveal a bit more so.
And I think that's a really important thing to sort of jump off from, because we're going to talk about the plot. We need to talk about it. We'll sort of briefly mention things that have worked for us. To some people, this could be quite a labyrinthian plot to approach, especially if you're quite young, or it's your first spy movie, or if you're not familiar with the tropes of the sort of genre. And just, I'll throw in my thoughts, then throw it out. One thing I sort of thought back on in my own thoughts, obviously having a rough time with it the first time I watched it, and then coming back now with 6-7 years of this show in my head, hundreds of spy movies, hundreds of plot twists, I'm kind of familiar now, I would say, and coming back to it, I have an idea about twists, and I just think, yes, this is dense, and it can be. You talk about that cross-cutting sequence where he's talking to Phelps but thinking something else in a sense, and I could see someone who's just got off of TikTok and is watching this on Paramount Plus being completely confused by that sequence, but that's the thing. This film requires you to pay a bit of attention.
Yeah. And
that's rough for people, I imagine, in 1996. Perhaps it's a bit rougher now, but I think with all spy stories, there's no spoon feeding here. There should be some confusion. There should be some misdirects. But the important question for me, holistically, is at the end, is there a catharsis? Is there a moment where it comes together and you go, it all makes sense now? And this film absolutely does that. I picked out when I was going through it, I was just looking at moments because I knew the twists. I was looking at things that hinted at it. And you could watch, for instance, during the Prague sequence, you can see Phelps on the camera turn the gun on himself just a little bit. You can just see his hand just coming in, and if you know he's wearing the gloves because you saw the shot, he's doing that. You can see the other IMF team in in the room. Like they are there. The details are there. It's just up to you to pick up on them. And I just think that's really beautifully done by De Palma and Cruz and the rest of the team. So looking at it now, yes, I think it's a masterpiece, but I can understand why some people do find it a little bit unapproachable, especially on the
Yeah.
first viewing. Cam, what do you think?
Well, it's funny because, a lot of those details you're talking about, I kept thinking about Alfred Hitchcock and the way that, like, his movies, there's a lot of intention behind the details. And that type of filmmaking is happening here in 1996 with Brian De Palma directing the movie. That is not how they would be making Mission Impossible films when you move into the modern era, right? Like when you're making The Final Reckoning and Dead Reckoning Part 1, it is a little more of the Marvel approach of we'll find it in the editing room. And, it's a different way of making movies now. And I think when you go back to a movie like Mission Impossible, maybe to some it feels outdated now. Maybe they watch this movie and go, this feels like an old movie. The way that, when I was a teenager, you'd watch something from like the 1970s or 80s and be like, this is old. And now I feel ridiculous for having ever said that. But at that age, a movie made like 6 years before you were aware of it felt like it was ancient. I remember seeing Die Hard and being like, this is an old action movie. And I saw it when I was probably like 13, so it was probably like 6 years old. You know what I mean? It just,
Yeah. Yeah.
if it existed before I was conscious of it, it felt old. And I feel like now this movie probably has a bit of that, but those details and the type of filmmaking, they feel very much of a time. But
Yeah.
in a way,
Yeah.
it's the reason that I keep going back to it. Why do I keep going back to North by Northwest? It's that same reason. It's the craftsmanship, and you sitting there going like, this is like a painting. It's somewhat timeless, even if it does seem of its era.
Yeah.
There's a reason
Yeah.
why I say Notorious is my personal favorite spy movie of all time.
Yeah.
Well, there's many reasons, and I could get into that, but that's a different episode. Griffin, I can hear you in the background murmuring. I feel like you've got something to say. What do you think?
No, it's just I just think that you're I agree. You're really speaking to, I think, the endurance of this film. Like, yeah, there's all the the spy techno jargon and the plot stuff, like the email sort of thing that feels like very, very 90s pre Y2K, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, even the knock list, like we all now know what the knock list is, but I think at that point in time, people are throwing words around like that. You're just like, I don't know what the fuck that is. And then, but to your point, I think why it's effective is that it's almost a case of, it doesn't really matter what those details are. You just feel the vibes of it. You feel the urgency. You feel like, okay, I don't like. You understand just like trying to unravel the conspiracy at the center of it. And like, yeah, you may on first or even second viewing, you may not be able to figure out how all the pieces fit together, but you get the gist of it. And that feeling of wanting to understand how all the pieces work together is why it's such a rewarding film on rewatch. So like, yeah, even like me at a young age, like I not understanding all this stuff and watching this movie, going back to what I was saying, I think why I was drawn to rewatch the film was because of just trying to unravel all of the secrets and the characters and the details and whatnot, even though like I think I was able to get like the vibe of it all. It's like it's a very atmospheric film, and I think that is more important to it than all of these like little technical things, the MacGuffin or whatever.
Yeah, can I just jump in there? Because
I was about to come to you.
I think that's really true. I did watch it again last night and was really impressed by a couple things. One, it really does play fair with the mystery. As you were saying, it's all there. If you're watching it, you can actually see that he's doing the gun. You see the whole team there. It does break POV from Cruz in a way that gives import to certain events. The way that it bifurcates the screen at times. So it really, I think, it is playing fair with its mystery in a way that is you do not see in the new movies, because they do not have a mystery. They are based on stunts that Tom has put together, and then they stitch together a plot from it. And for me, I don't love that necessarily. I love those, I love going to those movies, but they don't resonate for me. And I I don't respect their storytelling because there isn't any in the McQuarrie era cruise movies. Um, but another thing too that's really interesting, Griffin, that I did notice about this one is they do a really good job. A couple things. They do a really good job of selling the exposition of the stakes of the knock list. They do
Yes.
a
Yeah.
really good job of
Yeah.
clarifying like what that list is. They repeat it multiple times in the earlier part of the story. So it is something you can hold on to as the
Yeah.
threat and the danger as you're seeing these knocks essentially being killed off and being in jeopardy. So you're able to connect in your lizard brain the threat of this list coming out with the danger it is to people.
Yeah.
Period. That so that you have the stakes of the story. And then for me, I do love movies with jargon in them that you don't understand because all that matters is that the characters understand them as
Mhm.
professionals, and it's what you see in the ocean movies is they're just doing shit, right? And you're there to watch these professionals execute um their plans and their techniques. And there is for sure, something that I always call pseudo knowledge that you like to get from a movie where you think you're learning about spycraft and like, oh, I could be a spy now when I, watch them and, learn how to do that. I think that is something that's valuable. That's a part of what makes spy fiction fun. And I think they balance that well. And then there was one more thing that I was just thinking about in terms of, oh yeah, and it's something, again, I've seen this movie so many fucking times because again,
Mm.
just stealing stuff, right, for all the stuff that I've worked on. And they do a great job of setting up what the plan is, what they have to do, intercutting with them, potentially doing the plan, and then the plan goes to hell and everything blows up and nothing works the way it was supposed to work. But you've established that they have the tools and expertise that they were going to use in that plan that then they need to use in a different way, potentially, to get out of the situation. And I think that it does a really good job of obviously I don't think they invented that trope, but it's certainly something that we did on Alias in almost every episode, and you certainly see a lot of in other movies.
Well, I
So
kept thinking of watching this. Like, it takes me back to like more heist films, which are about you having confidence in the characters and that they know what they're doing. You go back to The Sting, with Newman and Redford. You don't know their entire scheme. The fun is watching them know exactly what it is and then surprise you at the end. And I think there is a little bit of a hint that that's what De Palma wants to do with this movie. The whole scene with Tom Cruise doing close-up magic with the disc, doing this, but that's kind of the trick of the movie, and that's why it's fun.
Well, and even going off of that, like you mentioned that scene, I think that he's that character in this film. I mean, my God, you compare him to like what he is in The Final Reckoning. It's like it's a completely different person. But what I like about him in this is that he has the confidence to sell something even if he does not know exactly what it is. Like he's a gambler, I think, which is really interesting in that first movie. Like when they go to the trash and they pick up the real knock list, he's able to sell Luther or not Luther, Krieger the lie there. I think it's really, he's like surveying things and then making informed decisions based off of that. I think is so interesting for that character. Like even the way he sort of winds up playing Claire. Like he obviously is a bit dubious of her at first, but then I think kind of falls into a little bit of a trust. But he's like, okay, we're kind of on the same side here. But then something else happens, and then the Phelps reveal happens, and he has to still play the part of the Ethan that he was before to Claire, so as not to tip his hand. So there's like a lot of just really interesting psychological moves being made from the characters in this part. And I think Ethan in this film is really interesting because he is like, the whole movie is just about the wearing masks and being able to sell yourself in an environment. It really takes the whole the most iconic thing from that television series and makes it a pretty core component of the film, and the whole deception aspect of it. And him as a character, I think is constantly having to present and a certain way, and yeah, I don't know. I just found that whole thing really compelling, and specifically the psychological component of it, the way you can see Ethan's mind functioning from scene to scene, and the way he has to pivot.
I love that. Can I just build on what you were saying about how, because, and we don't have to talk about it now, but I just don't want to forget it. You know, you mentioned that Ethan is a totally different person in these other movies, which is so true. And it was something that actually, it really made me think that it is an effective hero's journey. You know, we see Ethan in this movie as that very kind of naive person that has a sense of what the ordinary world is, being exposed to an extraordinary, world, and that it is another layer to his already extraordinary world that he didn't even know exists. And then a big piece of it for me was how he really, in that first Prague scene, he's all about the disc and all about the mission, right? And then that has morphed into him only really caring about his team and caring about people and caring about humans. And with that perspective of a lot of this stuff that we've seen in the later movies, it made me kind of appreciate how, actually they set that up, because they show how his whole team was wiped out and all these people betrayed him, and how that loyalty and human connection is the thing that really matters to the modern Ethan. And even, Tom's body, right? It was a different kind of physique that you could get away with in 96. And I'm not sure if he even had his teeth fixed yet in that movie, right? But it really, that character and Tom are different and in the later movies. And it's okay because it's set up that he is the boy in this movie. He is kind of the avatar for that boy spy fan watching a movie, exposed to these other layers of adulthood and maturity that you need to understand. And then he's, grown into something different.
That just makes me think about Tom Cruise too as a performer at that point. Like Tom Cruise was coming up as like the cocky, like hotshot character. You see it in Top Gun, but one of the important parts too was that he was often having these strong mentor figures in like movies like The Color of Money or Cocktail, a movie that's not as successful. But that was
Cogman's Law. It's amazing.
That was one of the things about Tom Cruise, was he was the hotshot, and here you really get to see kind of that transition of, you get that kind of, almost like temperamental, young, kind of too big for his britches type of character in Ethan Hunt, but you also see more of that transition towards where Tom Cruise is going to go farther down the road, where he becomes more of that mentor figure and stuff like Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. I also think, going off of the persona you were talking about, just the way these films kind of chronicle Tom Cruise, I do agree 100%. I think like this movie, I mean, it's I love this era of Tom Cruise because I think he was doing really interesting things. He was playing characters that presented a certain way while internally were perhaps a bit freakier than they let on, and you definitely see that here. I mean, like he's kind of a sleaze in this movie. Like you get the sense that he was perhaps sleeping with Phelps's younger wife, right? Like they had this kind of like relationship going on here, and that was his mentor. And then his mentor understands that and then kind of like uses that against him. There's a cockiness, there's an arrogance to his actions. But I think the thing, it kind of going back to the mask thing, to me, Ethan Hunt in this film is like someone who comes from, because they mentioned that his family has like a farm and everything. It's like, okay, so you are a guy who came from like middle America. You have like a working class background, and this was your way out. This was your way to see the world and to experience all these things. And so you create this character of Ethan Hunt that, I think there are glimpses where you see, like, I think between him and Luther, you get a glimpse of the real him, the attachment, the loyalty thing. I think that feels like who that guy really is. But this facade that he presents, like you see it with in his interactions with Max, he's really flirtatious. He's really, I don't know. He's not afraid to utilize his charm and sexuality in ways that I think were a bit, I like provocative. It's so, like, I don't know. To me, that's what's really interesting about that is just like seeing how Ethan has crafted. You get the sense that Ethan has crafted this persona, and then how the events of this film kind of challenge that persona. It challenges perhaps what he thinks spycraft is in the way that he has to operate within that world. And then the Tom Cruise element of it, you get this, like he's a conventionally attractive leading man, and he can do that very well. But I think as an actor, there's something else underneath him that is a bit adventurous, a bit I'll just say freaky, for lack of a better word. Is why he's so great in Eyes Wide Shut. I think Kubrick understood how to utilize that darkness underneath, and you see De Palma do the same thing here. So yeah, that's always a aspect of this film that I loved, and is perfectly in line with De Palma in the way that he, I think, views the world and the underbelly of societies, the seediness of stuff.
Can I just jump in? Just hit. Yeah. Let me hit two things, because Griffin, that was so insightful, and there's two pieces of it that I want to comment on. I loved, because I never thought about it before, that the backstory that you built, the idea that he kind of escaped this life and created this persona and went to this other world. I think that's very insightful. And just as sort of a Hollywood share, that is something you see in Hollywood, right? So everybody outside of Hollywood has this vision of it, and comes to town believing it is this thing, and then very often creates a persona that they then of who they need to be to pass in Hollywood and be this Hollywood person. I've been very lucky that a lot of my core friend group coming up in town were all people that grew up here, and they have a completely different attitude, perspective, and persona, because for them it's just a job, it's just their hometown, it's just a company town. But there's this fantasy that people outside the business and the city have that is false. So very often you see people come to town and create these personas for themselves that sort of are exactly what you're talking about. So there's a meta level that I'm going to be deconstructing a lot based on what you said, Griffin. The other piece of it is I've been lucky enough to meet Tom a few times, because I helped out a little on JJ's mission, and went to parties and stuff. He is that intense guy. He is one of those people that you meet, and I think he might be 5'5" or 5'6", and I'm short. I'm 5'6", and he's small, but he has that intensity and that persona and that wildness that is still very visible in this movie. And sometimes you do get to see it, but it's exactly what you were saying, that those good directors know how to capture it and know how to pull it out and apply it to the character. So that was cool.
Well, kind of tying into that, we interviewed Paul Hirsch a while back on the podcast, who of course edited this film and had worked with De Palma a number of times. And one detail that always sticks with me is, this is Tom Cruise's, as we've talked about, first real producer role on a film. And one of the things Paul Hirsch noted was that Tom really wasn't around the editing room very much. Like, this was very much him trusting Brian De Palma to make the film. So, Griffin, when you talk about this kind of examination of Tom Cruise, Brian De Palma had the freedom to do that. It sounds like Tom Cruise was like, you're the director, I'm just going to be hands off because I'm kind of finding my comfort zone. I do not get the sense that's the case as the franchise evolves, and Tom Cruise is a much more active, I think, creative driver as to what the story is and how he's going to be depicted in the movies.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's why I'm
on the Mission movies, I'm sure that's true. I think he is pretty well known, though, for, unless shit goes bad, Mummy, that he stays out of the process and lets the director, do their thing when it's a director that he trusts.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't move us on to the next subject about the film, because we're talking about espionage, we're talking about the future films, and I think one thing that's really important to touch on with Mission Impossible 1996 is the evolution of the franchise in a sense, but also how this is perhaps the most spy of any of these films. This is the closest to a classical spy thriller you're ever going to get, and I think Is that to a detriment of the series? I think the box office would show that maybe it isn't. And I wrote down in my notes, it's more suspense than storytelling. And I think that's for the better of the film. Hitchcock was already come up in the conversation. I suppose I want to put the question out, do you all think and agree that this is a far more spy-focused plot? And do you feel like the series perhaps has lost something in the way over the years by moving more towards a sort of more Fast and Furious and less John le Carré, if you know what I mean? We'll go with you, Griffin.
Yeah. Shit. Yeah, I definitely my preferred missions, I think, are this one, 3, 5, which are the more conspiracy spy based ones. I mean, Fallout to me is like it's just a masterclass in action, and there's a simplicity to the story, and so like that. Fallout is so weird because it's almost this different beast entirely that just happens to be a Mission Impossible film. But 4 as well. 4 Ghost Protocol is also very like maybe more so than 5. But I miss I do miss the more cloak and dagger sort of intrigue aspect of the thrilling aspect of espionage that I think these films used to have, because that's what's engaging about spycraft, that about spy medium or media in general, is the way you can string the audience along just based on like these ideas and the withholding of information, and the way the protagonist navigates all of that, and then eventually culminating in these reveals and whatnot. Yeah, like I don't know. It is something I miss. I just because not a lot of movies like really have that anymore. Even like movies within the spy genre. I think the last one that really had that was like Black Bag, which was just solely like Soderbergh doing an exercise in like traditional espionage thriller stuff. So while I think some of the middle films in the series managed to find a good balance between high stakes action and thrills and whatnot, it's still not to the degree of what this movie was doing. And part of me wonders if that is really like the De Palma of it all, right? Like it's just like that's kind of his thing. Like he was this guy who was like really excelled at making like psychosexual thrillers, and what better way to make something like that than in the world of espionage, where that is just like, I mean, it's just like a haven for that kind of thing. And like I don't know, the obscuring of truth and the manipulation and stuff like that. Like it's a perfect playground for someone like that. So there is something that has been lost along the way. But then I will say, like with something like MI3, I really appreciated how that film kind of went back to the TV roots of the series. Like that almost felt like I know people always talk about it feeling like an episode of 24, an episode of Alias, but it's like that's really fucking cool. Like that's cool because you're bringing it back to where it all sort of began, and you're giving people like this prime time, like blockbuster action, 2 hours of television to an extent, and that feels true to the series in a different way, while still having like stuff like the Rabbit's Foot that is like the MacGuffin or whatever, well, and like the mystery surrounding that. Like
I'll jump in and agree in a sense, because one of the mission statements, if you forgive the pun, of this series was to have different directors, auteur directors and stuff leading the charge of each film, having a tonality change, having a visual change, and you get that 1, 2, 3, 4. Brad Bird in there doing his own version, and then 5 to 8 becomes kind of a one singular palette in a way, because it's one director. And I think that is something lost, and I have gone on record saying I think that is perhaps a shame. But I want to focus on the here and now and the mission that we have. But I think, Jesse, you are prime candidate for this question, because you have had your hand in all sorts of espionage television. You've loved the genre for a very long time. Looking at the Mission franchise, looking at this film in particular, do you think it is particularly spy focused? Is that a detriment or a positive to the film? And do you think it's lost it over the years, the franchise?
Yeah, well, I think it's just evolved and it's just different. And I think De Palma and I think Robert Towne we have to talk about, who wrote the
Yeah.
screenplay, apparently, was part of it. That, they had a very different aesthetic and take on what a spy movie would be. And I think these movies are designed for audiences as well. And so it's just evolved over time to be different based on who the creative forces are behind it and who the audiences are. And I think that's appropriate. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that that's changed, because there's certainly tons of amazing, whether I love that show Black Doves, whether it's Slow Horses, whether, there's plenty of like more spy based, thoughtful explorations of the espionage genre that you can watch. So the thing that I do miss, and it's why I don't love the McQuarrie movies, is I do miss there being a story, and I do miss it playing, fair with a mystery. And I don't think I don't understand or connect with the villains in those movies. And I hate the retconning of what Ethan cares about. The flashbacks are fucking ridiculous in those
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
I don't understand, like, what it doesn't make any, I just don't get it. I understand why you sell that and why you say that stuff out loud to try to get your movie made and convince yourself that there's some depth to it, but I don't think it's real. I think it's just BS. So I miss that part of the craft, but then I, love the different types of craft in the Ethan movies, and I think it does. Um, you see it even in the Prague scene. You see the rapport of the team and the joking with Jack and the make like that. That's been consistent in all the movies, and certainly JJ leaned into that. And I think JJ did a good job with three. I think, right? That was
Hmm.
his first one of being, again, as he does, being a bridge between the old and the new. That there
Yeah.
is a lot of De Palma in some of the moments, and certainly the close-ups, and certainly the aesthetic very often in that movie. And he does have that banter with the team, and has carried through, and is the arguably the only human piece of the McQuarrie era mission movies. It being able to see human beings who care about each other, talking about to each other in a fun way. And that is something that was established in that, Prague sequence and with Ethan's first team.
Mhm.
And also by the end with him and Luther sitting at the bar
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
You get that sense too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
yeah. Going back to the team thing, because I think that's so true. One of the things that I really liked about the films up until the more recent one, that I think this movie is, you're absolutely right. You understand the team dynamic right from the jump and how they are with each other. Outside of Luther, who's just kind of like the mainstay of like, I mean, he's like one of Ethan's like best friends. It makes sense that he would be along for the journey. I liked that they changed up the team with each mission, because I think it offered them an opportunity to explore different dynamics, have characters that challenged one another in ways that perhaps they hadn't been challenged for, or perhaps ways that we as an audience have not seen them challenged before. And that's what made it exciting. Like, you're always going to have your Q or your Luther, whoever. I mean, Luther's not quite Q, but he is like the tech guy for all intents and purposes. So I'm fine with that. And then also having like an anchor so that Ethan kind of has like a, someone that he understands and works with, and that allows us to get a bit more of his interiority while confronting him with new dynamics. That was really, I mean, they established that in that first film, and they continued it on for a little bit, but then they just kind of fell in the cycle of reusing the same cast of characters. And there was definitely something lost there for sure.
I just want to dive in for those who are just listening to this. I'm watching Jesse react to Griffin's points, and I think I may have just started a bromance between the two of you, because I think you two are in simpatico, and it's really great to see like a harmony there for two people who have just met. There's like a harmony of thoughts on this film, and I think like Jesse, did you have anything
I'm
more
just
to
gonna
add? No, go ahead.
You set me up just to build it up there, because when you are building these things and building these ensembles, the characters serve different roles, right? So as you said, yes, it's someone that Ethan knows and has had a history with, the Luther character, and then Luther can call out Ethan because he's built that trust, right? And so you have that character that's been with the story the whole time, who can bring out those pieces of Ethan and challenge Ethan in certain ways, and be loyal to Ethan, despite some of the reversals they've had in the past. And then what's very important too is having those new characters who come in to be part of the team that on some way are avatars for the audience, right? Stanley always said every comic book is somebody's first comic book, right? So every mission movie is somebody's first mission movie. So there needs to be a character that is coming into that world that not hasn't necessarily been part of that world before or part of that team, who can introduce people to that world in a way that isn't as much exposition heavy, but is integrated into it, and can also make the audience that loves it get to see those characters learning about this world. And oh, wait till you see what Tom does now, because we've seen him do this in all the other movies, and you get to see these reactions. And I would plug, I'm a huge Brad Bird fan, and his commentary on The Incredibles that you can hear on YouTube that he does is amazing, about how he talks about reactions and things like that, and it's on display in Ghost Protocol. And I think the Ghost Protocol commentary is pretty good as well, just talking about the behind the scenes crafting of the story and working with the ensemble.
Yeah.
Cam, you didn't have anything to add to that bit? I think you've already said your thing, or...
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Well, then I'd be remiss if we didn't sort of go and talk about Brian De Palma a little bit more, and also the team behind the film. We've mentioned the screenwriters, but as I say, I like the fact that these mission films, especially the first few, had a directorial stamp on them. I'll throw it out to the room. Maybe we'll start with Cam. What is De Palma bringing to this film? What is his gift to this film?
Oh boy. I mean, what isn't he bringing? This is pretty much all of Brian De Palma's obsessions, both on a technical level and a thematic level. All of the conspiracy elements, you get like kind of the sexual kink aspect with whatever's going on between Phelps and Tom Cruise and the Emmanuel Pierre character. You have black lingerie, a staple of De Palma right at the start of this movie, split diopter shots, and sequences that are so impeccably constructed visually that they play as silent films. And you get that with the whole Langley heist. Mm-hmm. This is just pure De Palma. And to me, it's funny when we were talking about, did the franchise losing kind of the spy focus take away from it? I've always wondered what, the great what if this had stuck to its guns, this franchise, and been a really director-focused, stylist-focused franchise. Because John Woo, I'm not a big fan of Mission Impossible 2, as we've talked about. But I do appreciate that they said, John Woo, do your thing with this. Let's see what it is. J.J. Abrams, do your thing with it. And Christopher McQuarrie, I think, Fallout, a movie I'm incredibly enthusiastic about. But he doesn't have the stylistic chops at all that you get with, like, De Palma or even John Woo. And so that is a part of it to me when I watch the De Palma in this movie. I mean, this fits in the De Palma box set. Obviously, it's in the Mission Impossible one, but you could make the De Palma box set, and it's just an evolution of where he's going. And we were talking about the Phelps twist earlier, and so much of De Palma, a lot of his movies, are impacted, as Jesse said, by Watergate and what was going on in America in the 1970s. And I feel like the twist with Phelps, the reason it works within the context of De Palma is that if it's Kittredge, for example, behind it, what does it mean? I think it has to hurt. And I think whether De Palma really cared that much about the TV show at all or not, I don't know how he actually felt about the character of Phelps. But by making Phelps the rat in this, he gave you a twist that hurt. And it hurt the characters. And also, to a degree, there was an impact felt on the audience. Because it's not the sort of thing you should just go, oh, the new character who I just met, who I don't really know that well, from an actor I'm not that familiar with, is the bad guy. Okay, whatever.
Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, I think everything that Cam said is exactly right. This is a De Palma movie. I'm a huge fan of the Dutch angles and using that to convey emotion, mood, tone, vibe, and I think the close-ups are awesome, and the voyeuristic camera is perfectly it is legit for the genre and his auteur way of making movies. The kind of creepy-esque way the women are treated is De Palma appropriate. Um, I think he, this is wacky insight. So he has a lot of the close-ups, right, in Mission 1. And when JJ did Mission 3, he had all these close-ups that were just very similar. And the studio was freaking out. Like, what are these close-ups? This is too TV. This isn't a movie. This is TV. And JJ really had to sell them on the power of the close-up to connect the audience with the characters and convey emotion. So, for sure, this movie is. I think that's why it is a cinematic classic because there is such a craftsman behind it. I was part of that group of guys in LA that went to the New Beverly and the New Art in the 90s to all the John Woo movies when they were dropping, like every other person that is, McQuarrie or Favreau or any of these people now, we were all young people going to see those John Woo movies and love John Woo because he had that visionary aesthetic and why Mission 2 was such a heartbreaker because it really didn't have that that kind of style or even melodrama that we had expected from Wu that would have elevated it. And I do think that, JJ and Bird, Bird with Ghost Protocol really brought their own aesthetic to those movies, which is for me, I think they work really well. And they're mission movies, but they also feel made by an individual, and lean into the strengths and the vision of those directors. Where for me, again, McQuarrie fan, right? I love, Way of the Gun. I thought was amazing, and Usual Suspects. But I wish McQuarrie had been maybe potentially more assertive as a filmmaker or director when he got engaged with the property so that maybe his original style or vision, I don't know if that's really fair to say, because Usual Suspects has a lot in common with his Mission movies. And the Usual Suspect story, as far as I understand it, right, it is they fixed it in post, right? With the Kaiser Soze twist. So again, I guess he is doing what he did on Usual Suspects, right? Where you're building these great moments and these interesting characters and cool dialogue, and then you're sort of stitching it together later. So I guess that. And then thinking of Cruise, right, as that creative force growing into being a man and a visionary and a powerful filmmaker in his own right, crafting those films as the creative force behind them. So I think that it's cool to think about the movies that way.
Griffin, anything from yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've kind of talked about just like the way that De Palma builds the spy world, the less glamorous side of it. I mean, that feels very him. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the scene with Kittredge, which I think is having this kind of disillusionment of the agency as he's being framed and whatnot, and I mean, even Danny Elfman's score, the way that kind of like escalates into this weird, just kind of like, I don't know, just like ejection of intensity and the use of the gum on the fish tank. It just that whole scene is quintessential De Palma, and I love it so much. But I think like he, going back to the whole idea of masks, like this movie being this big mask reveal about what the agency actually is, and having Ethan come to understand that throughout the course of the film. I think De Palma really understood that, and he structured the film like an extended mask reveal, if you will. He's building, ultimately to the literal, mask off moment at the end. But aside from that, I think he understood that the entire appeal of just espionage in general is like the deception, the subterfuge, the performances, the artifice, the mind games, the psychosexual nature of it all. And he distills all these things into one movie. It's just a perfect encapsulation of the thrilling aspects of spycraft, and the way that he paints the spies like thieves in a sense feels very De Palma. And also, I don't think there's been anything. There wasn't really anything like that up until that point in time. I mean, like definitely there was a more realistic interpretation of espionage prior to that. But the decision to paint these as guys who are using the skills the government taught them in order to do their own thing, steal some money off of the side. There's no real loyalty to country or whoever, really just kind of to each other. That's kind of a band of thieves, if you will. And I thought that was a smart way of interpreting spies post Cold War, in Phelps's inability to adapt to that. Or I guess just like him coming from a different era and believing something else, and the way that kind of rubs up against with these new hot shots who just are just like, whatever, we're just kind of here doing our thing. That felt really De Palma. I mean, I think the other thing, I had a couple of notes here about this, the ending. I think the ending, I don't know if it was just me, but it felt kind of it feels like there is this, the way I interpret it, and maybe it's just because of the way that I view De Palma as a filmmaker or whatever, is Luther kind of like, I understand why Luther would return to the agency, because that's like the space that he knows and everything like that, and he's just like, I'm gonna go back in it, clear my conscience and everything. I'm a independent worker, maybe I can do some good in the agency or whatnot. But the thing that I love is that Ethan, now knowing what he knows, and understanding that he doesn't want to work for an agency that in danger of becoming the Jim Phelps later down the line. And I don't know, there's something cynical just about the idea of like, these guys, like, they come in with the best intentions. They want to try and shake up the agency. They have their own moral codes, and then they eventually succumb to just like the confines of the institution they're within. And I don't know. That's why I always wish that somewhere later down the line, Ethan broke bad a little bit. I know it's kind of out of character, but it just does feel like that's the direction De Palma maybe would have gone in, and that would have been an interesting direction for sure. I mean, they toyed around with it in some of the later movies, but I don't know. That was, I've always appreciated that ending. It doesn't, it's nothing like flashy or whatnot, but it feels very De Palma to me.
It's a cynical movie because those guys were cynical filmmakers coming out of a very cynical era. So I think that is absolutely what it is.
Yeah, and we should note too, like, this was kind of De Palma's big, I don't want to say final hurrah, but this was like, he was never going to match this again. Because you look at what comes after. Look, I love Femme Fatale. Snake Eyes has a big cult around it, but he never had a movie like this again. This was his last big hit.
Yeah, and a lot of that is the secret sauce, right? It's working with Town, working with Cruise, working with IP that puts you in a box. Like there are a lot of pieces that aligned to help him do potentially his best work. There's certainly other types of it, but this is pretty incredible in the way that he's able to deliver what makes him special, along with these big set pieces, in a way that I don't think you see in his other movies.
Yeah, the populist appeal for sure. I think that's not to cut you off. I was just gonna say, like, it is in a lot of ways the culmination of everything that he's been doing. Because like a film like Blowout is a masterpiece. It's incredible, but like your average person isn't going to go watch Blowout. I mean,
no.
Your average cinephile will, because it's like, required viewing and whatnot. But there's nothing there that's really going to like sell the concept to a broader audience. So something like Mission, where it is spycraft, it is easily accessible to your average person, and then he's able to get in there and do his thing. I mean, I totally agree. It is like the big hurrah for him and the culmination of a lot of his work. Yeah.
Now, I'm skipping a few sections that we had planned just for time, but there's
We
one
can
thing that
keep
stood
Cam.
out.
We can keep going if you want to keep going. You can't. We can because my dog is asleep, so it is not like begging me to take it for a walk. So we can do
Okay.
whatever you want to do.
In
We're
that
all having a
case,
good time, and
in that case, well, then we need to talk about spectacle. I think is the next thing. We've mentioned some of our scenes, and I think Griffin, you kind of queued it up because we hadn't said much about that restaurant aquarium scene,
Oh,
which I think
yeah.
is truly one of the, if not the defining moments of Mission. I think Langley Heist is probably up there too. But if we're going to take away the Langley Heist, I'm going to take that off the table. I want everyone to pick a favorite sequence from the film, and it's going to be potluck who I give this to first and gets the first pick. And then by the end, we have to stretch a little bit more to get to that point. So I'm going to go with Cam first. You get the first pick. Apart from Langley, because we all love the Langley sequence, what's the next best thing in Mission Impossible 1996?
Well, when you take away the best, what's next? You know what? I'm gonna show some love. I feel like there's a lot people could say about the opening, but I'm gonna talk about the tunnel sequence on the train. A
Hmm.
sequence that I think might look to some maybe a little outdated now, just technologically versus what they could do, say, in Fallout. But this sequence to me is still fantastic. The way it's choreographed, the way that like De Palma's overcoming a lot of hurdles that would make a sequence like this age poorly. And there are no shortage of movies from this time period or going into the 2000s that you watch them now and you go, huh. And I see no shortage of reels on like Facebook of like, can you believe we watched this in the year 2000? And it's like a clip from like The Mummy Returns. You know what I mean? Um, to me, the effects hold up pretty well in this, but there's like also like a physicality to this sequence that I love. They've obviously built up a lot of tension with everything going on the train with Max, and you have Kittredge moving in, but then to have Tom Cruise on the top of that train, the way they deal,
didn't they do like a practical thing with the helicopter in the tunnel?
yeah, they did. Like you could see some
There's
seams,
like
but
a
like they did,
transitional piece
yeah,
to it where they actually flew the helicopter, I think, into the tunnel, like
yeah.
for real, and to that before they really had to hand it over to the CG stuff that I think, helps make it a compelling set piece.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, I can see a moment like you can at one point see Krieger in the chopper, and it looks a little bit like Kirk and Scotty in the shuttle in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. When they're circling
Yeah.
the Enterprise, you can kind of see that like almost like two-dimensional, cardboard stand-up Krieger. But I don't care. There's
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
movement, and De Palma knows how to direct a sequence like this to every inch of his life, and he pulls it off.
And
Yeah.
there's also a little bit in this scene of something that the Mission films would lose later on, specifically in The Reckoning. To
Even just comparing the train set pieces, the one in Dead Reckoning to this one, and the one in Dead Reckoning does not look nearly. I
Yeah, yeah.
intellectually, I know what they're doing is impressive. I know Tom hanging off of these things. It's like the way they constructed the inside of the train and were manipulated. Like I'm aware of that. But the feeling I get watching that versus the feeling I get watching this train sequence, even like them fighting on top of him and Gabriel fighting on top of the train versus Tom Cruise fighting John Voight on top of this train. It's just it's missing I don't know, like a tangibility, like a feel, like I'm not buying it. Verisimilitude, I guess, is the right word to be pretentious.
I do think, and it's something we're seeing a lot online. And I just was having this conversation with my son who's in film school about how high key so many movies are on TV that they're just so bright and the lights are on all the time.
Yeah.
Mm.
And a lot of that is put on, digital and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that, lighting is one of the most time consuming pieces of the filmmaking process, having come from shows like Hannibal where we spent a lot of time on lighting, and American Gods where we spent so much time on lighting. It just eats up your days, and I think
Mm.
that is something that I actually am a fan of. Dead Reckoning, which was the first of the two-parters, I think, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I actually like
Me
that
too.
movie. I think it's pretty effective, even though I think again the retconning of Ethan's past is fucking terrible. And Gabriel, again, I don't get it, but I like a lot of it. But it
Mm.
it just is not. I don't know how well it's lit, honestly, in
Yeah.
that train set piece. I like that set piece. I love the Uncharted, 2, I think
Oh,
has
sure.
a
Yeah.
game has a huge train set piece, which
Yeah.
so many
Uncharted
of us
2.
have all
Yeah.
been trying to copy for years, and it was fun to actually see a version of that. Um, but I think so much of this movie holds of Mission One holds up in these set pieces because of the cinematic art that was brought to those set pieces, like the train and the aquarium, and obviously
Totally.
the vault.
Well, Jesse, you're here. Why don't you say what's your pick then for the next
For me, it
best
would be
scene?
the aquarium.
Hmm.
I think the aquarium. I liked the vault, but honestly, I wasn't as vault crazy as so many people were. I loved the cinema of the aquarium, the graphic of it, the revelations that Tom was going through, and the confidence in Kittredge, even though that you really felt that Tom was effed, and then suddenly starting to realize, oh, that one is the most evocative of what I would really like in a spy movie, where you are grounded in the real world, in an interesting, exotic place that, like, oh, that would be cool to go to Prague and go to that aquarium. What if all the water came out? That's great. And it's like humanly possible, right? There's rules of physics and story that are on display that are connected to reality in that set piece, and the cinema of it I think is terrific.
Yeah, didn't Tom Cruise say this was like the most stressful stunt he
Yeah.
ever had to pull off? Yeah.
Hmm. Because
Because
the physical,
water's
just the water landing on him,
Yeah.
he had to get out.
Yeah, I believe
Guys, you can't believe anything they say. Come on.
that.
Anything that you guys read where they're talking is not something that Tom really revealed himself is about how he felt. It's like, give me a break.
Don't dispel this for me, Jesse. I've had this built up in my head for years. Okay, it's fine.
That's
Well,
funny.
it's
That's
a
funny.
beautiful pick. It's a beautiful pick. I'll take last position. Griffin, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I'm outside of the aquarium set piece, which I think I like that set piece. I won't spend too much time on this, but I love that set piece, and I think it's as engaging as any action set piece for the same reason I love the poker scenes in Casino Royale, because they are shot intensely. They're shot almost like an action scene. The way that they build the tension and they ramp it up in the cutting, and then the use of close-ups and whatnot. It's masterful. It is so effective. But I actually really like the after the Phelps reveal, the conversation that he has with Phelps, where Phelps is telling him the lie and feeding him all this information because he thinks that he can pull a fast one on Ethan, and then the intercutting between what Ethan is thinking and how he's piecing it all together versus what his actual responses are. It's just a really clever way of conveying the deception that Ethan is kind of going through. These two guys who are having a conversation with each other, talking about two very different things. And yeah, like it feels, I mean, that scene also kind of reminds me of stuff like you get in like a Casino Royale poker scene. You've got two men who are playing their cards close to the chest, but you have the knowledge of the one guy who is holding all the cards. And so the drama, I guess, comes from when he's going to use that information in order to get one over on the other guy. It's a really similar to that aquarium scene. It's a really effective dialogue scene that is utilizing the language of cinema in order to, I don't know, just build up tension and stakes and stuff.
Just to lean into that for 10 seconds before we move on, that language of cinema, it's exactly right. And it's so wonderful when you see it on display in this movie about how he's conveying information visually. And it was one of the most annoying things working in television on anything, is that the people that we worked for would not treat it as a visual medium. And you see a lot of talk now like, well, Netflix is telling all their creators that they need to write it for a second screen, and I can't believe they're doing that. It's like that was TV. Was you have this everything has to be written for people folding their laundry. So it was incredibly hard, and it's brutal in Alias, and if however you stick with it, you'll probably see a creep of it, is that there was more and more and more verbal exposition that it comes out, and it's something that we've had to do in all these genre shows, and it kills the genre shows, because the more you explain the stuff verbally, the more you realize this is stupid bullshit. This is fucking terrible. And the only way to sell this kind of stuff is to track the characters emotionally and use use the cinematic visual art form to convey the best version of that ridiculous plot as you can. So the audience needs to project the best version on it instead of having it be explicit. And I thought Dead Reckoning, for me, did a pretty good job of conveying exposition. I thought it did a good job of that. And it's just, sorry to jump in there, but
No.
I tend to treat these as therapy and revisit old wars.
Well, I'll sign off in the sequence I actually was going to pick and no one picked. So I'm actually quite happy I'm left with it, which is the initial mission, the Prague mission that falls apart. I mean, I do have some questions about the skills of some of the team. Kristen Scott Thomas, great to see in the film. She leans into someone being stabbed and then gets herself killed in the process. Interesting take on it. And it's, I also just want to talk about, first of all, our guest next week, we haven't mentioned, but next week we're sitting down with Rolf Saxon, Mr. William Dunlow himself, talking about Mission 1 and Mission 8. So we'll be giving you a bit more of Mission Impossible next week. Stay tuned for that. We've had Ingeborg Adapkane on the show before. He played Hannah in that sequence. She told us all about the amount of money they spent on those glasses to just go change color, because they did that in real life, which is quite cool. So go check that out in the back catalogue. But for me, that sequence, the reason it works for me is it just feels like the walls are literally coming in, especially towards the end on Ethan. Everything is going wrong, and he hasn't experienced that until that point. You see the cocky Ethan, the Ethan that's chewing gum at the back of the room asking for a coffee machine, just chewing the fat with his boss and his team. And then it's actually landing. The weight of this mission is landing on him, and then he goes off to meet Kittredge at the aquarium. And I always go back to No Way Out. 1987 No Way Out, Kevin Costner film, as a exercise in being in a small location and having it feel like it's actually getting smaller by the minute. And that's exactly what that Prague sequence does for me.
Yeah, and I think like the casting of no offense to Inga Borga, who I wasn't familiar with at the time, but I think the casting of Kristen Scott Thomas and Emilio Estevez is brilliant, because you go in with a sense of like, well, these are big stars. This is obviously the team. And we didn't have the level of obsessive attention to detail we have nowadays with the internet and making all these kind of facts known right up front as to who's in the movie and for what percent. How long did they shoot? Oh, they showed up for a couple days. Oh, that's all reported online, all that sort of stuff. Whereas, like, sitting down to watch this movie in, I guess it was probably 1997 when it hit video, didn't think Emilio Estevez would be checking out so violently so quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and just to, Scott, just to support you on that set piece, I think that
It's
is
just like the perfect heist.
isn't that every set piece in every Tom movie?
Yeah,
it's like he
yeah.
never fucking gets anything in the.
Yeah.
He never gets what he
true.
came after.
Yeah,
he just
that's so
doubles
true.
down, and he's always wrong, right, about what he thought was happening.
One thing I want to do before I get to sort of quick fire wrap ups is we've been very complimentary of the film, and there are of course a downside and a critique to everything. If everyone has one they'd like to bring up, I will start us off by saying I think one of the weaknesses is, if there are any weaknesses to this film apart from perhaps the plot being labyrinthine that we spoke about, is I think that Emmanuel Biart's Claire gets maybe a sort of a shorthand with this one. I think there is a lot of depth that could have been mined from the character. I think that it isn't. And I'm not sure the casting was necessarily right for that role. Can we talk about the casting for another role? I feel like in different hands it could have been different, or it could have been in a different script, looking at it from a different perspective could have been different. But I don't think she ever really connected. Where I think I was supposed to feel a tension inside of Ethan, like he was like somehow pulled in different directions with her. I never really felt that. I felt like that she was just sort of a thing he had to get over, leg over or not, to get to the next point of the plot.
They never had it. The women don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
They're just zeros. Fuck, it's disgusting that is really John Boyd's wife, whatever. Like that. It's just, there's so much De Palma, Robert Towne, legacy. Misogyny is a rough word to throw around, right? But that whole generation of filmmakers did not understand women as people and humans, and they were objects to be looked at or dominated or and again, I don't think I'm being a dick saying that. It's pretty clear in the oeuvre of De Palma. Then that's who he was, and sometimes it works better than others. And they're terrible. Those female characters are fucking terrible in
Yeah.
this. And again, like you're talking about the casting, I don't know how appropriate it is because they don't have anything to do. And I
Yeah.
guarantee you they were not directed in a way that had them understand what the fuck they were doing there in those scenes and what their relationships were and what their motivations were.
Yeah.
It must have been frustrating for them.
Well, and
I was
also-
thinking about, like, I don't think the Mission series really gets a strong, well-written female character until Rebecca Ferguson turns up. And then you actually have someone who is of substance, who could carry her own series of films if she were to have them.
Totally.
What they do with the character later on, I have a question mark about, but that's not for this episode to discuss. But yeah, that was my critique of the film. I don't think that was handled very well.
Yeah.
And I would
That
just
is-
say too, like Tandy Newton in the next one, the character is not written the best, but she has legit chemistry with Tom Cruise, which I would say Emmanuel Bier just does not. And that's a problem because I can put up with a lot of flat dialogue or underwritten characters if the chemistry's there and you just feel it, because like that fills in gaps for you as a viewer. But this is also like an international actress coming into this movie. How much assistance was she getting in kind of transitioning into blockbuster Hollywood cinema? I feel like not much. And, it's unfortunately a kind of poor result for her.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree by and large with that. The one thing that I do think it weirdly like kind of works in favor for the Phelps character, who is kind of misogynistic towards like women and his wife in general, even like going so far as to just like exploit her in order to exploit her sexuality in order to get what he wants, and then kind of ditches her at the end. So like it works in relation to him, but on the whole, like, yeah, like some of the earlier scenes between her and Ethan, I mean, Ethan's pretty brutal towards her a lot of times as well. So you get some of that De Palma misogyny and Robert Town misogyny in there, which hasn't aged the best. I'm trying to think of like the other like issues I think I have with the film. I mean, I mean that's a glaring one. I mean, I don't know. That it really is like the I think maybe the big one for me. I can't really
I think the pacing is out of it was it's a film slightly out of time, right? It's more appropriate for the 70s of Winter Kills, Conversation, Parallax View, those kinds of conspiracy thrillers. That 96 blockbuster in a theater, we weren't as incapable of focusing as we are now, but we were on our way, right?
Yeah.
And it felt slow, man. That movie felt slow in the theater in 96, especially when you had a GoldenEye or an Independence Day or all the other movies that you mentioned. And that is a failing of not necessarily of the film, but just the fact that it was out of its era, right? Because with a different perspective or different pace or a glass of wine in your home theater, it's an amazing masterpiece. But with the expectation of summer blockbuster, the pacing of that movie doesn't work. Luckily, it has the recency effect of the third act big set piece, but the beginning is very deliberately paced.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a minute to get on its wavelength for sure. And I mean, you mentioned the GoldenEye thing. Yeah, coming off the heels of that. Absolutely. Yeah, the other thing I just remembered, because I mentioned it earlier, the Phelps reveal. I think the Phelps reveal happens a bit too early. I think maybe creating some sense of uncertainty. It's just one of those things where it's like Phelps returns and then it's just kind of like immediately the rug is just like there's no real dramatic tension as to what's going to happen with that character. I felt like there needed to maybe be something where like Ethan is kind of unsure whether or not he's I don't know whether or not he's the bad guy or he's behind it all, but it just kind of immediately Ethan goes to, oh, you're the mastermind behind the whole thing. And I understand why he would think that. But like the movie doesn't really try. I don't know. It is one of those things that just happens a bit too early for my liking, and then removes a little bit of the dramatic tension from the finale. But you know.
I mean, the Emmanuel Bier thing is like my glaring one, but I will say, like, related to what Griffin's saying, one moment that has bugged me more and more as I've sat with this movie, and I've
Slumped or asleep or something that more to help sell it.
like a hand on his shoulder maybe or something.
Yeah.
And you get close to it, but honestly, I think it's an editorial issue that could have been addressed that would sell it, because it is appropriate in that it is De Palma. You're selling this is Ethan's loss of mentorship, his certainly feeling at that moment, or wanting to sell to the audience his sense of guilt for failing his father. Certainly that's how Phelps is presented. So
Yeah.
I think it's an editorial issue, but you're not wrong that it doesn't totally work.
Okay. I think we've mostly exercised this, but I want to throw a couple of quick fire questions at everyone. We've spoken about GoldenEye and we've spoken about the 90s in terms of spy movies, but if we're going to put two of the sort of behemoths of this decade, which is GoldenEye and Mission Impossible, up against each other, which one would you be picking to re-watch? We'll go around the room. Start with Griffin. GoldenEye or Mission Impossible 96?
It's GoldenEye. I mean, GoldenEye is like one of the best Bond movies in the series. Bond's my franchise too, and I've had a longer, well, maybe not. No, maybe about a little bit longer relationship with that film, just given the video game and everything, than I have with Mission. But I mean, I think GoldenEye is about as perfect of a Bond film or perfect of a action spy film as you can get. So, and it's just endlessly rewatchable. So, as much as I love what De Palma does in this movie, it is one of those ones that you kind of have to be in the mood for. Whereas GoldenEye, I think, gives you all of the post-Cold War, spy stuff, but in a way that's a bit more exhilarating. The characters pop off the page or pop off the screen, and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's GoldenEye.
Jesse, what about you?
GoldenEye for sure. Just as an entertaining movie, I've seen that movie a lot. I have terrible ADD, and one of the ways I cope and help myself be in the chair is I'll have a TV in the background with a movie that I'm familiar with on, just to help me lock in and mark time and then be able to look up and see something interesting. I've had GoldenEye, as many times as I've had Ghost Protocol. I think those movies are very, very satisfying and entertaining and rewatchable and not deep, don't require your attention or critical thinking in the way that Mission One does.
Okay. Cam, what about you?
It's a lot closer than some might think. I think I would give the edge to GoldenEye, which is pretty much one of the perfect James Bond films. The thing about this movie is, if I'm craving something that feels more auteur driven, I'm going to run to Mission Impossible. And that happens. There'd be an evening where I'd be like, you know what? I want to watch something that has a little more maybe substance, at least stylistically, where there's something to dig into. And it's going to be Mission. But I would say, if I have to choose one, GoldenEye.
I think I won't belabor it. I think I'm the same. But that also, GoldenEye was what brought me to the Bond game and the spy movie game. So it has a lot to answer for me in terms of nostalgia. The other question is, in terms of this mission, is where does this mission sit for you in your rankings? I'm not asking you to give us all your rankings, but is it your favorite mission movie? Does it sit in the middle somewhere? I'll start us off. For me, it is number 2. Griffin, what about you?
I think it's my number 2 as well. I was gonna pull up my list real quick just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure it's number 2 unless I look and it's different. But yeah, I think I'm in the same boat.
I don't want to give mine away because it might spoil a future episode, which is also a spoiler in itself by saying it. Jesse, what about you?
I am slightly biased, so I think my favorite actually This is weird, guys, and it's an overshare, but I just am a Ghost Protocol fan because
Mm.
I love the guys who made it. I know what they did to make it. I know the whole story behind it. And I think it is really comfort food and fun and does have a story in it that is trackable and a villain in it that is trackable and doesn't try to play off of retconning a lot of stuff. And I do love JJ's three. I think is great. You know, Alex and Bob wrote that for him, who are guys that had written on Alias. A lot of the gags are Alias gags. I helped out on a few things, and I love the way that JJ brought his. Um, JJ always believes that you need to track the characters emotionally. The genre stuff and the set pieces stuff, it's going to be great. It's going to be crazy, but we need to be connected to the characters and we need to be emotionally grounded in them. And I think he did a good job of that in three. And again, reinventing a franchise and bringing that back is something that he has done. And I think he did that well in sort of some of the De Palma styling that he brought to three in some places. So I think Mission One is my third favorite of this of these, and then I would go to Dead Reckoning as four, honestly, which is weird, probably.
It's
I
not that
actually,
weird.
it's not that
I
weird at
really
all.
like that
No,
movie.
no, I would pick it over Final Reckoning for sure. I would say for myself, number three is also Mission Impossible 3. I have a real soft spot for that film. So you and the team, fantastic film. I constantly throw praise in that film for being the most character-driven mission we ever had. I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
JJ had always been obsessed with opening a movie with a party, and you see it in Cloverfield, and
yeah.
I did it with him on something else, and so it was really funny to see him do that. It was something that he thought was just such a great way to establish a character, and I love the way he does it with the lip reading. I thought was so fun,
Yeah.
and it helped the audience be part of like we know Tom's really a spy, but she doesn't even know. And there's so many great things in that movie that are cool.
Cam,
This is actually my favorite Mission Impossible film.
Wow.
Um, it's the one that I consistently feel compelled to go back to again and again. And we're gonna talk at the point in the podcast we have not reviewed Fallout onwards. And so far, like this is the one that I consistently rewatch. Whereas even ones going forward that I love, I've only watched like two or three times.
mm.
This movie I go back to again and again and again. And it has like there's a mysterious element to it, thanks to De Palma, that just draws me back again and again. I come for like the technique, but there's something about it that just pulls me in every time. So
Yeah.
this is my favorite. I think it is, some may say like they like the stunts more in Fallout or Dead Reckoning or whatever, but like this is the most interesting Mission Impossible movie to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
cinema.
totally agree.
This
It
one
is.
is cinema, right? This is a fucking shitty thing to say, considering my friends made the other ones. This is a real movie, right? It
Right.
was made by a real director, written by real writers. And that, again, I'm just saying that to be silly. But it is an important cinematic work um, that pushed the limits of the craft and established tropes that have been copied moving forward.
I think then all I can do is end on one final question for everyone, and that is: we're now looking down the barrel of 30 years since this film came out. What is this film's legacy? It's a big question. You can answer it however you'd like to answer it. I'll go to Cam first.
I mean, the shot of him dangling at Langley, that's a big part of the legacy. That shot is still being used in The Final Reckoning. I guess, though, its legacy is launching a new spy franchise, which is not easy to do, and one that will continue to endure in some fashion, cinematically. And the character of Ethan Hunt being a figure that is going to really play a major role in pop culture. It's so tough because I feel like if you were to ask me this question, say we were celebrating this anniversary and Fallout had just come out last summer, we'd be like, oh boy, things are looking great. Whereas now we sit at a point where everything feels at a crossroads with this franchise. And so I look at this movie as this is the launch to something very, very successful. Where it goes from here, I don't know, but this franchise did matter and does matter.
Griffin.
Yeah, I guess that's really the thing, is that it is the just being the start of this long running I guess, yeah, I'll say iconic franchise, which kind of I think it's interesting and I talked a little bit about this earlier, and how these films kind of chart the course of Tom Cruise in the different eras of Tom Cruise, and the fact that they baked so much of who Cruise was at that point in time into this film, I think laid the foundation for that trend to then continue, whether or not it's intentional or just kind of a byproduct of the way Tom is, I don't want to say reinventing himself, but just indulging different sides of his persona or acting persona. Yeah, I don't know, these movies, to me, and this being the one that kicked it off, they serve as an interesting time capsule for Tom Cruise and his life as this spectacular performer. So maybe that, yeah.
I think for me, I'll throw it to Jesse at the end if you don't mind. I'll let you have the final say on that one. For me, the only thing I'll add in is this film added to the canon of spy movies. It didn't take from, it gave to. And there aren't many by the time you get to 1996 that were doing that. You go back to 1940s, there are films that are beginning to build things that would turn into James Bond. But there aren't many after 96 that added to it. You think about maybe The Bourne Identity as the next big one along the way. You've got like Mission Impossible 2, they're doing, skits about it with Ben Stiller or whoever it was, and all sorts of stuff. Like it impacted film beyond just spy movies, beyond this little like corner of film that we like to talk about. And that all started here. And it may not be everyone's cup of tea. This might be the Mission Impossible fans' Mission Impossible movie. But that's absolutely okay, because once you get into it through maybe dipping your toes in through Fallout or Dead Reckoning or Ghost Protocol, you can come back to this and find out what the purest version is. And I think that's what Mission Impossible 1996 is.
Yeah, I would say that, you're circling something there for me, which is previous to this. And dude, I'm old. I don't remember anything, so I could be way off, right? But for me, when I think about it, spy movies was James Bond, period. Like there wasn't really anything else, that was remarkable or had an impact or was a franchise, or if you thought of a spy movie, you thought of James Bond, right? And then this came out and it added a new element and sort of showed, I'll use the word Hollywood, that there were more spy movies that could be franchises and successful than just James Bond. And whether it was the Broccolis or whomever, James Bond was really gated in terms of a release schedule and in terms of how it got done. And then the idea like, oh fuck, we can make our own spy movies. Like we can make our own spy blockbusters. That it sort of opened up the idea that you could make spy movies, that it was okay, that you had permission as an executive to greenlight a spy movie that wasn't James Bond. And then it also added the elevator element of pitch element of Mission Impossible to the lexicon of Hollywood. It's like Mission Impossible, but they're the street racers, Fast and the Furious, right? Like you could say, you could use the shorthand of Mission Impossible versus the shorthand of James Bond, right? Because James Bond was such a unicorn that it was never helpful if you were trying to sell an espionage project. But Mission Impossible, it would give you more, oh, I get it. Oh, I see there are all those different characters. And oh, it's not James, like it would help you sell stuff. So I think it opened the gates to audiences getting a lot more spy content cinematically and on television.
And it's fascinating to me to think that The Bourne Identity was only 6 years after this movie. because they feel so worlds apart. But you're right. Like Mission Impossible being successful and Mission Impossible 2 being even more successful opened up the gates. And 2002 is one of the biggest spy launch years, period, on record.
Yeah.
What else came? What just because I can't remember what else came out then.
You had Triple X was also competing in that
Come
arena.
on, Xander
I know.
Cage.
Yeah. You had, I think that Undercover Brother, there was like spy spoofs starting to come out in the wake of Austin Powers.
Yeah, Die Another Day, the last
Die
Brosnan
Another
film.
Day.
Right.
Yeah.
Born Identity, and
There's a
that's
couple even like
2001,
smaller ones too in 2002, and I can't remember if Spartan was like 2002, but it was like
Oh, I
something.
loved
There was
it.
a few of those
I love
types of
Spartan.
movies as well that year.
Was the Ben Affleck which one am I
Jack
thinking of?
Ryan.
Jack
Yeah,
Ryan.
the Jack, was that year too or no?
Shadow Recruit.
I
think
think no, not Shadow
No,
Recruit.
that's Chris
It's-
Pratt. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Some of All
Chris
Fears.
Pine.
I think that was 2003, maybe,
Okay.
but it's right
No,
around.
no,
then.
it's
That's fine.
2002.
There
Griff,
you
It
you're
was
go.
right.
2002. Okay.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That
Yeah,
might
so
be
that
the
was- that
end
was a
of the
crazy year.
boom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there
Anyways.
hasn't been a big boom like that since.
No.
Yeah.
The
No.
post Skyfall feels like that boom, that or that second wave of that, because so much was taking from Skyfall after that film came out. I feel.
Well, I often with these roundtable episodes, I don't know how to finish the conversation because I feel like we've just run the length of the film talking about the film, and I somehow don't think we've done it justice. Maybe that's just my own sense of inferiority, but I'm glad to have been surrounded by the expertise of both yourself, Griffin, and yourself, Jesse. Thank you both very much for coming on. I hope you both feel like you've excised a little bit of mission love here, and you've shared some Mission Impossible stories with us. I hope you've had a good time talking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did. I loved it.
I'll ask the question. Griffin, I'll go to you first. If people want to hear more from you, I mean, you'll be tagged in all of our stuff this week, and there'll be links in the show notes below to go and find your YouTube channel. But where can people find you online, and what can they expect from FilmSpeak?
Yeah, you can head on over to the FilmSpeak channel on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Griff Schiller. What's the next video we have coming out right now? I know we are doing a Bond video towards the end of the month. I think some sort of editor. Well, when First Light comes out, we're going to cover First Light for sure. But I think we're going to talk about Jacob Elordi as a Bond casting and just like why that's intriguing. The idea of injecting some youth into the Bond franchise and how that could reinvigorate things. We've got that coming out. Mandalorian and Grogu's coming out, so we'll be covering that and everything. So yeah, just head on over there. We've got some great videos on the channel if you haven't seen them already.
And you've got some mission videos on there too, if you want to keep the mission flavor going.
Literally did a video on Mission Impossible 1, which was basically my talking points for this. So so there's that. I have two very long ones on The Final Reckoning and Dead Reckoning because I didn't care for those films too much, but you know what? That's okay. And yeah, we got a bunch of Bond videos as well. So just head on over there and check it out.
They have no human villain. There's no human villain, which is a disaster.
I know.
It's
I
so
know.
stupid. It was like Jerry Bruckheimer JJ and I had a meeting with Jerry Bruckheimer. He's like, you got to have a human villain. There has to be a human villain. It's like, what the frick? And Gabriel,
I know.
really? It's
Yeah,
not.
it's
not.
yeah, it was a disaster.
I think you two are going to have your own spin-off video about Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning now.
God, yeah.
We'll host it on the channel. We'll just
I
let you
like
two talk.
Dead Reckoning. I like it.
I do too.
And Jesse, what about yourself? I mean, obviously, I spoke about your credits going into it. What are you working on at the moment? What are you up to?
Honestly, I'm just screwing around. I do have a Substack where I post things that I'm thinking about, and it's a way to help me process the world. Scribblejerk.com is my free Substack where you can go and look at stupid stuff that I say or am doing or thinking about if you're interested. But that's really it. I've been doing my gig for over 30 years and trying to figure out what's next as the industry immolates and trying to build new things and figure out what the next generation and types of storytelling are going to look like. So into that stuff, and I talk about it on that Substack, but don't think you're going to learn much other than that I'm psychotic.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I urge you all to stick around for next week as we speak to Rolf Saxon and gents. Thank you both for coming on the show. Thank you very much.